Hello and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is Module 3C, Cultivating Connection with Choice and Ownership. So you are on the road to 4 habits that stick now that you're in January and week 2 of looking at your connection strategy of giving students choice so that then you can monitor that habit and problem solve ways to improve it. All right, so given the disconnection that we're experiencing with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really impacting our relationship building with our students. But the good news is that research gives us opportunities that we have to give students choice and ownership to foster a sense of connection, whether you're in person, in hybrid model, or remote model of learning. When we give choices, they peak intrinsic motivation during independent learning, and then during group work, we can give ownership and roles to students. And so I'm excited to share with you some ways that you can do those things. This objectives for this module are to learn those evidence-based choice and ownership routines and to specify a new personalized habit for you to use and use your daily pulse to monitor that. So you need about 20 minutes, some clear headspace, your printed or digital journal, which looks like this, so that you can do steps 4 through 6. And just keep in mind that we're thinking about habits, right? So habit mindset says that there's not a grandiose shift in my way of work, but I'm going to carve out some habits on a daily basis to find those cues and routines and rewards to build that as a loop into my day. So tune in, complete step 4 by watching and following along this video in your guided notes. And let's dive in to thinking about choice routines, whether it's the low work completion that you're experiencing or imbalance engaged groups. I have a number of strategies that I can share with you today that I'm excited for you to see. And it's ultimately your choice of how you'd like to move from pits of low work completion or imbalanced groups into more peaks in those arenas. So whichever pit is yours, I'm excited that you're going to have some choices here. So let's start with low work completion. And the 2 strategies that we're going to have here are learning menus and confidence helpers. And basically what these are within a reasonable range, us providing students with equal options for how they gain and show independent understanding, whether it's the content that they consume, the modality of response, and the way that we evaluate. So which work we evaluate of theirs. And this is highly aligned with the Universal Design for Learning guidelines, which basically encourage for us to have inclusive and differentiated classrooms to give students multiple means of engaging, learning, expressing themselves. And so this is a great technique for building more inclusive classrooms. So the first one that we're going to talk about that can be used across all models of learning is learning menus. And this is the idea of proactively designing independent tasks with options for students, content that they consume, what they submit. So let's tune into a video that shows learning menus in action.
One of the strategies I use in my classroom is a strategy called menu. So first, I knew that if I was going to pull a small group today to really get at what they knew, I had to do something with the other 20 to 25 kids that I had in that room. Menu is an opportunity for students to independently develop a concept in a variety of different ways. You'll notice that our menu tasks are on the very back counter. Most of the menu tasks are application tasks. I use a variety of resources, sometimes within the curriculum, but oftentimes with open educational resources. And I put together a series of tasks that help develop that concept over time. You'll be pushing through those by yourself as I work with a small group of people. Our conversation tomorrow will really focus on challenges that you had today. Today, I had an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert option. I asked students this time to pick one appetizer to do, and it kind of got them primed and ready to tackle those main course options. Often, I let students pick which of the tasks they actually want me to give feedback on and grade. So if students do 5 tasks, but they really only felt successful on one, then the best feedback I could provide them with is the one in which they chose. Before a student goes into dessert, they'll need to come and show me those tasks that they're choosing for me to grade. If their thinking isn't really fully developed yet, I'll have them go back and add to their thinking before they go into dessert. The students get 1 point for answering the question and labeling their work. They get 2 points for giving me 2 different strategies. And students get an additional 2 points for explaining and justifying why and how those strategies make sense. One of the things that I really realized is the students were coming to me with 2nd grade math skills to 8th grade math skills. Menu is a way that I can use the progression document in the Common Core standards, and I can get tasks that span those needs in my classroom. And I can give all students access to those.
So a great example of something that can be a great tool for highly inclusive environments. All right, now let's move on to thinking about other options that you have with the learning menu than those shown, is that ultimately you can choose a lens through which a student completes an independent task, whether it's in synchronous learning or asynchronous learning, of thinking about giving them the choice of a role that they can play, an audience that they're delivering the content to, a format that they use, the topic upon which it's described. So here's an example here of what we call a raft, where there's combinations of these available to the students. And as a reminder, you can do this for asynchronous work as well. All right, so let's move on to confidence helpers. Confidence helpers are a more reactive way of giving students choice when we see students having those first signs of frustration, of not being so sure about themselves, or maybe being actively defiant and not completing the work. But they're quick task modifications that we use in those first signs to give students choice. And so there's actually a card that I will provide for you that I've worked with a lot of teams who print it out, laminate it, put it on their lanyard so they can have quick access to the different options in this umbrella of strategies that are a very trauma sensitive approach to slow starts. So what they are thinking about giving students choice, having a few choices in your toolbox for quickly getting students re-engaged. A classic one is, do you want to use a pen or a pencil? And so these are strategies that you can use quickly to revert the student's attention away from the work that is overwhelming and into what options they do have before them. Next one is chunking. So you can chunk the work by saying, just do these 3 and then check in with me, raise your hand, and then I'll check in and take a look, and then we can continue the work. But you're breaking down the overwhelming amount of work potentially into more manageable chunks for that student. Next one is chopping. So this is giving the student choice of which ones they would like to do. So maybe they do one and then cross one off, or they do odds and evens, but somehow reducing the workload. So you're emphasizing the quality over quantity. Next one is chaining. So giving students the choice of starting with an easy step or a mastered step that they have in the activity so that they can feel confident going into the rest of the activity, but having some flexibility to be able to start and give them the choice of where they'd like to start. And then finally, checklists. So breaking down a big daunting project or task into a more manageable checklist so that the student can have a sense of accomplishment for making those smaller steps. So there's a number of strategies that we have at our disposal for boosting students' confidence when we see those first signs of a frustration or slow start. And I'd encourage you to think about this if you work with a lot of students who have a history of traumatic experiences or behavioral challenges. The next one is imbalance or disengaged groups. If that's a pit for you, then I'd encourage you to think about some of these routines here that we have, which are basically giving structure to collaborative learning opportunities that you have in your classroom. So it's a range of strategies to promote that choice and ownership, from clear steps and phases in the collaboration and choices of roles that they serve. So the first one I want to share with you is Think, Pair, Share, which is a brief collaborative problem solving with clear phases. So you're moving from defining groups, whether it's the pairs of students or table groups or breakout room in the video call, and then using a 1 to 2 minute timer for 3 phases. First, think and answer independently. Second, pair up and compare your notes. And then third, share and report the answers to the whole group. So you're breaking that using a timer into those 3 phases. So let's take a look at this strategy in action.
Doing is we're practicing the distributed property, and the thinking part is going to come from you, where you're going to take 30 to 60 seconds, I'll give you the time, to think about the problem I'm giving you. Work it out on your piece of loose leaf paper. Then, when I tell you, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about it in your group. come to a collective answer so that you all agree on it and write your final answer on that whiteboard that I've given you. Ready? Here's your first question. Thirty more seconds to work on this on your own. Okay, talk it out. You have a minute and a half. Discuss your answers.
Within the group, they had to talk about what the answer that they came to was, and they discussed with themselves why it was what it was. And then within the group, they were able to deduce whether the answer that they either all came to was correct or whose answer they were going to go with and why.
Yeah, it's got to be 24.
24 is the last number.
But
I think,
Did you?
I got negative 68x plus 40.
I typically group the students by ability as well as personalities. I like to have a higher learner with some of my lower learners. Some of my students are very helpful and some of them like to keep to themselves. So I like to mix it up so that the weaker students have the ability to hear from a different perspective than mine of how students are arriving at their answers.
but if
All right, so a great example of something that can be kind of done on the fly at times. And when you're in remote learning, using those breakout rooms to give that same structure of think, pair, and then share. All right, the second strategy that I'd like to share is group roles. And so this is where you follow through on assigning your group work, but then you define the students' roles and responsibilities in that group. So rather than letting them go open-endedly into the group, we define who's the leader, who's the note taker, who's the checker, who's the researcher, art director, spokesperson. There's all kinds of roles that you could potentially use in this strategy. So let's take a look at a video that gives this in action.
These mixed ability groups of Year 9 pupils are about to become advertising agencies with the job of marketing London. Each group is given responsibility for a particular role.
So if you are the leader, you need to organise the group. It's your responsibility to do that. If you are the creative director, you're in charge of ideas. So when we assess this at the end, we're going to assess the geography in it. We're going to assess all the stuff you've learned about marketing London and tourism, but we're also going to be looking at how well have you done in those roles.
It's about them developing their team working skills. That's the skill we highlighted at the start of the lesson. And it's just really, really crucial that that is structured for them. I think, young people don't automatically know how to work as a team, and you have to support that process.
You need to choose a target audience. I don't mind which one you choose. Go for it.
How about a group of university friends? That would be easier because we all know what we're doing.
Students learn better by talking to each other, not by listening to the teacher. So any opportunity to get them in pairs, in threes, in fours, talking about the learning rather than the teacher telling them things, they're going to learn far better. You've got
Philip Accordingly, Director of the Centre for the Use of Research and Evidence in Education.
There's a really skilled use of building group work skills and social skills. We have to remind human beings about what it means to work effectively as a group. Actually, it's true for the same research is true of businessmen too.
All right, so reminding students of how to work in groups by defining their roles is a great way. And as a pro tip I'd like to share with you is to create cards or assign, to be able to assign to students the roles they have or give them choice. Have the cards at the desk or at the table so they can pick which one they would like to use. And then of course, using your breakout rooms during remote learning. And then there's all kinds of roles that you could potentially use. A pro tip is to just think about the roles that fit the content, the activity that you're trying to promote, and then assign roles based on the student's readiness. So keep in mind those skills that the students are coming with and what they would like, how ready they are to take on different roles. All right, the final one that I'd like to share with you is the Jigsaw, which is a group-led learning opportunity for complex, multifaceted material. And so I'm going to let this video tackle the explanation here because it's a really interesting technique to cover complex material when you want to get students involved in supporting their ownership of that.
So what is the Jigsaw method? Developed by Elliot Aronson in 1971, Jigsaw is a cooperative learning strategy where each student in a group takes responsibility for one chunk of the content, then teaches it to the other group members. Like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, students fit their individual chunks together to form a complete body of knowledge. Here are the steps of a basic jigsaw, sometimes referred to as Jigsaw 1. Step 1 is to divide students into groups of 4 to 6 people per group. Jigsaw works best when you have the same number of students in each team. So avoid having some groups of 4, some of 5, and some of 6. Later in this video, I'll show you what to do if you can't divide students into perfectly even teams. For this example, we'll assume you're working with a class of exactly 30 students who can be divided evenly into groups of 6. We'll call these jigsaw groups. Step 2, divide your content into 4 to 6 chunks. It's important to divide the content into the same number of chunks as the number of students in each group. So if you have 6 students per group, break your content into 6 chunks. If you're only going to have 5 students in each group, then you'll only need 5 chunks. Suppose you're a history teacher and you're doing an overview of different types of government. You could divide your content into these chunks: democracy, dictatorship, monarchy, republic, totalitarianism, and theocracy. By the way, these index cards just represent chunks of content. You don't need to use actual index cards to do Jigsaw. A chunk of content can be a section of a textbook chapter, a handout containing information, or an online resource. Step 3, assign one chunk of content to each person in the Jigsaw group. Each group has one person responsible for one chunk of the content. That person will be expected to teach that chunk to the rest of the group. At this point, students don't really interact with other members of their group. They just read and study their own chunk of content independently. Then their independent study is fortified by the next step. Step 4, have students meet in expert groups. After each student has studied his or her chunk independently, they gather with all the other students who have been assigned to the same chunk. These are called expert groups. Within each expert group, students compare their ideas and work together to prepare some kind of presentation to give to their Jigsaw group. During this time, gaps in individual students' knowledge can be filled, misconceptions can be cleared up, and important concepts can be reinforced. Step 5, students return to Jigsaw groups. Now that students have studied their chunks in their expert groups, they return to their original Jigsaw groups, where each student takes a turn presenting their chunk of information. Meanwhile, the other students listen carefully, take notes, and ask lots of questions. Once the first expert has gone, the others take their turns. As each expert teaches their chunk of content, the others in the group are learning it. Step 6, assess all students on all the content. The assessment can be a simple quiz to make sure all students got a basic understanding of all the material. Be sure to include all content chunks in this quiz.
All right, so there we see great opportunity to help students take ownership of the content they're learning, because you're dividing them to groups and then chunking your content so that each student has one chunk of content that they own, and so that they become experts with others and then share that with their Jigsaw. So this really empowers students with ownership before you move into a whole group discussion. So it's a great opportunity, and there's a lot of research showing that it improves retention and student inclusion, and we can use this strategy within breakout rooms during remote learning. So here are your 5 strategies for cultivating choice and ownership in your classroom, and it's your choice of which one you would like to make a personalized habit. And so thinking about when are you going to use it, and which strategy is it going to be? So that's the next step, is personalizing this for yourself. And what's the reward for you? What's the cue? What's the pit that you want to address? So maybe it's after seeing Joe staring into space for a minute, he's not starting his independent practice work, you give him the choice of where to start, or to only do the odds or evens, so that you're giving him a sense of ownership over his work. Maybe it's after you want to expose students to different perspectives. So you use a think, pair, share to get them talking and notice that they're building a connection with each other. Maybe it's when you want to get groups working efficiently and productively. You're not, you're expecting a slow start to your groups. You assign group roles with pre-written cards about each role, giving the students choice in that, and notice that they're learning and connecting from each other's skills and developing those collaborative skills. Maybe it's when you need to teach students very complex material that can be categorized. And so you're going to facilitate that Jigsaw activity and notice that students are taking ownership in each other's learning. There's a number of strategies that you can use, and I would encourage you to consult your guided notes in your journal to think about which one best fits your current pits and areas that you'd like to see improvement in your connection in your classroom. So the next steps are to share your key takeaway and your own personal habit plan. And the key here is to making it stick. So at this point, you should be switching over to thinking about this strategy during your daily pulse. When you're completing that, about your target strategy, it should be voice or choice. And at this point, if you want to continue with choice, then be sure to reflect on that for the following daily pulses. So if you need any help with that or have any questions, I look forward to hearing from you how you're going to cultivate choice in your classroom.